there's going to be a lot at stake in the state of Arizona. And you're already seeing, I'm already seeing it on my Instagram feeds,
Sure.
with all my friends and family that are living in the state of Arizona who are organizing, talking about how, it's important for people to vote, to make their voices heard. And on top of that, there is expected to be an abortion measure on the ballot as well.
Right.
It's not fully official, but they are gathering signatures and they're looking very close to being able to do that. So on top of that, when you have an abortion ballot on the measure, a very restrictive, law go into place, that's going to drive turnout, or so we think that it is.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by Congressional reporter Samantha-Jo Roth. SJ, Arizona, your home state, the state Supreme Court really dropped a hand grenade in the middle of what could be one of the most competitive states for the presidential race this year. Talk a little bit about what they did.
Yeah, so basically they are now banning abortions in almost all cases. It was back to a Civil War era statute, and they're putting that into place. And you're seeing some, backlash, obviously.
Sure.
But this is really, underscoring just how important the state of Arizona is. I think a lot of us, we already have been talking about for months and months how pivotal this state is, but now it's ground zero for immigration. It's ground zero for the abortion fight. And you have one of the most competitive Senate races in the country. And on top of that, you have a presidential election where, the President Biden, really only won there by, I think it was 11,000 votes.
Right.
So, this is going to be one of the closest elections of our lifetime. And, I think a lot of people are looking at this saying there's going to be a lot at stake in the state of Arizona. And you're already seeing, I'm already seeing it on my Instagram feeds,
Sure.
With all my friends and family that are living in the state of Arizona who are organizing, talking about how, it's important for people to vote, to make their voices heard. And on top of that, there is expected to be an abortion measure on the ballot as well.
Right.
It's not fully official, but they are gathering signatures and they're looking very close to being able to do that. So on top of that, when you have an abortion ballot on the measure, a very restrictive, law go into place, that's going to drive turnout, or so we think that it is.
Right. And, that ruling came right as former President Trump was trying to, sort of refine his abortion messaging and sort of put the issue back on the states as a way of maybe neutralizing it as a campaign controversy.
Yeah, and I think that's been a challenge for him, kind of being like, well, I don't agree with this one, or do I agree with that one? Or, that is a very fine line to have to navigate. And I think you're seeing some of the top Democrats really seizing on that. For example, this week we've seen Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer saying, which is it, Trump?
Right.
Is he going to change his tune? And I think a lot of people, if you've been paying attention over the years, while it is clear that, former President Trump did put into place this Supreme Court, which did strike down Roe v. Wade, he hasn't been as, anti-abortion as some other Republicans. So this is not a surprise to see him kind of waffling on this. And this is certainly something that Democrats are going to look to seize on over and over again. And, I think we saw during the midterm elections, Democrats really seized on this abortion issue. And there were some questions about, as we've gotten further out, is this going to be an effective strategy once again? But when you look at the number of states that continue to do these restrictive rulings, putting it right back into the headlines, there is no doubt that they're going to try this strategy again, and maybe they'll be successful once again.
So you've written a story about this. There's another thing that could really complicate how Arizona comes down in the presidential race, and that's all the third-party candidates. What are some of the things that you have found?
Right. So third-party candidates are likely going to have an outsized influence in the state of Arizona. As we talked about earlier, 11,000 votes was the difference between Trump and Joe Biden. And so when you look at the numbers that a third party could pull in, and it is important to note that RFK Jr., he has not officially gotten on the ballot there, although a super PAC that is supporting him has said that they have gathered all the needed signatures. And when I've spoken to experts, they say if this is what they're aiming for, they're likely going to get it. So if he appears on the ballot, we also know that Jill Stein of the Green Party, she is going to be on the ballot. There's a huge number of not undecided, unaffiliated voters.
Mm-hmm.
And that number has only grown over the last couple of years. I mean, they are very close behind the Republican number of voter registration. I think it's like 34%, and then it's like 33%. Mm-hmm. It's super, super close. So you're going to have a lot of people who are very upset with their choices. We've seen that poll and poll again reflected. They don't like Joe Biden. They don't like former President Trump. So they're looking for another alternative. Mm-hmm. And especially when you have so many important races like the Senate race, like these abortion measures. I mean, it's very likely people might just go and vote in those and just put in a write-in or check one of those boxes. And in a state like Arizona, where it was so close last time, yes, do we think a third-party candidate is going to win the state or any state? No, absolutely not. But it could tip the scale in favor of one candidate or another. And, from the people that I've spoken with there, Arizona could be really ground zero for this problem.
So here in Washington, D.C., still a lot going on with a very, very small House Republican majority. And the smallness of that majority is causing a lot of headaches for Speaker Mike Johnson. Where are things sort of headed on some key legislation right now?
Well, it's been certainly a major headache for the speaker. This week, we have seen things completely unravel with the FISA law. It's a surveillance law that they need to be putting back into place. Basically, a group of Republicans just tanked a vote on a rule to be able to move forward with this legislation. This isn't even the legislation itself, it is a rule. So this was just the process to move forward, and they tanked it. So obviously that doesn't look very good. Unclear what exactly went on, but there's a bunch of Republicans who were unhappy about that they didn't get to offer amendments, that they weren't as involved in the process. And this is just emblematic of what we've seen, time and time and again this is just what happens when you have such a small majority where just a couple of members.
Doesn't really take very many people to.
No, and we were standing outside of this GOP meeting yesterday, and members were coming out and they were being very frank. They were saying, there was a lot of yelling and screaming. There was, I think, like half the people in this meeting don't understand exactly what FISA is, which is it's a very complicated law. So, we have former President Trump weighing in, which also is a very complex factor. So, I've heard from a lot of people saying, man, I do not envy Speaker Johnson. He has a hard job. And then I've heard from people who are very angry with him, saying you need to follow the leader of our party. So I think he's in a very tough spot. We also have legislation regarding Ukraine aid and aid to Israel. No clue when the heck that's coming up. But this majority certainly is dysfunctional. I don't think anyone would doubt that. I think Republicans I've spoken with continue to say that.
It's really tough with just those small numbers, trying to get things across the finish line.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, SJ.
Thank you.
You can read Samantha-Jo and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.